Today is May 21st, 2014. My name is Joe Todd. This is an interview with Denzil Garrison in Bartonville, Oklahoma. Sir, where were you born?
Norman,
Norman.
Cleveland County.
Yes. When's your birthday?
November 20th, 1926.
1926. Who is your father?
Joseph Don Garrison, Sr.
And your mother?
Nita, N-I-T-A, Ellen Smith.
Did you go through school in Norman?
Yes,
Graduated what year?
1944.
1944. What type of work your father do?
He was with the Norman City Schools, and he was in the 45th Division National Guard, and they were called active duty in 1939, I believe it was, and he left at that time to go on active duty. Mm-hmm. And he was at that time a major in the 45th Division, and he, upon being called to active duty, he was promoted to lieutenant colonel, and very soon he left the 45th by order of the Army, and he was sent to Europe to be on Eisenhower's staff, which he was over there before actually we got in the war. Mm-hmm. But before the invasion, yes. I mean to say.
That before Pearl Harbor?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, it was after Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
When he was on his way overseas, my mother and I and my little sister accompanied him to New York, and the Normandy, the big French ship, had caught fire and capsized, and we saw it there at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. That was quite a sight. It's like seeing a city block laying on its side.
What did they do with the Normandy?
They scrapped it.
Scrapped it, okay.
Yeah.
Couldn't be refitted then?
Evidently not. They didn't do it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it was a huge ship.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. What was your address in Norman? Where did you live?
I lived at 410 East Rich Street in the northern part of Norman.
Okay.
For the first 18 years of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I returned from service in Europe, my folks had moved to 816 South College Street out by the university, and I lived there with them up until the time that I was recalled to the Korean War.
Okay. In your schooling in Norman, who was your favorite teacher?
At what level?
Doesn't matter. You're just your favorite teacher.
I believe that my favorite teacher was my 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Constance, Constance.
Now, why was she your favorite?
She was a very nice person who seemed to care for her students, and I learned a lot from her. She taught me in the 6th grade.
What school in Norman did you?
Jefferson School,
Jefferson School.
on the east side.
Okay. How large was Norman in those years?
Oh, Norman was, we used to say 15,000, and that was stretching it in those days.
How many students at the university?
At that time, get a lot of
Yeah.
those calls nowadays.
So how many students at the university in those days?
I would say probably at tops 15 to 18,000.
Okay. Did you play sports in high school?
Yes, I was a football player, and we had a very good football team in those days. As a matter of fact, we were the mythical state champions. And we had an excellent leader in Bill Ramey, R-E-M-Y, and he had a heart defect and died very young, but he was very successful in business life, and he had a very fine family, and they're still making good names for themselves.
In which stores did you shop in Norman?
McCall's Men's Store and Norman Paint and Paper Company, and Gilt Edge Dairy.
Gilt Edge Dairy. Did you know Mr. McCall?
I knew several Mr. McCalls in Norman.
Okay. The one that ran the men's store?
Knew him very well.
Tell me about him.
He was extremely tall, well over 6 feet. I'd say probably 6'5", maybe 6'6". And he had been a pursuit pilot in World War I, and he had a hard time in getting into those little airplanes, according to him, but he was a fine guy. And he had sons, and they were all my friends.
What did you do for recreation in high school?
Well, actually, most of the time, I was partaking in athletics.
Okay.
And I got a lot of recreation that way.
How many movie theaters were in Norman?
There was the Oklahoma Theater and the Sooner Theater, and out on the campus was the Boomer Theater. So there were 3.
How often would you go to the movies?
I'd say once every 3 weeks.
Okay. How did the Depression affect you and your family?
Well, it wasn't easy. And in addition to the Depression, of course, we had the Dust Bowl that hit Oklahoma. And my mother's parents lived out in the Oklahoma Panhandle, and they had a rough time of it weather-wise. And also, my mother's twin sister and her family lived out at Hooker, and they had a hard time. But I spent a summer out there during the height of the Dust Bowl, and it wasn't easy living.
How'd you keep the dust out of the house?
Well, they hung sheets dipped in water or soaked in water on all the windows, taped them shut, and then the dust got in anyway after a short time. But people died of dust pneumonia all the time.
And you said this is your mother's...
My mother's father and mother.
Okay. What were their names?
John Smith and Ida Smith.
Okay. Now, were they farmers, ranchers, and
No, he was in business. My grandfather, he had an automobile garage, and he sold case tractors. But I thought very highly of him. I liked to go out and visit him.
now when you went to Hooker, how did you travel?
By automobile with the windows down, and there wasn't such a thing as a car air conditioner, and it wasn't easy to travel.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd say that's one of from Norman to Hooker, Oklahoma, it seemed like 1,000 miles.
Gets awful flat out there.
Yeah, it is. It's awful flat, and when that dust bowl came, there'd be great black clouds. There'd be thousands of feet in the air, and it would roll in. What happened, as I understand it, is that they came in there and plowed up the prairies, and this disturbed the top layer of the land, and the wind started, and these great huge dust clouds took place in the so-called Dust Bowl area, and that is western Oklahoma and the Panhandle, western Texas, Colorado, and Kansas and Nebraska. It was not a pleasant thing. In fact, it affected the health of many, many people.
How'd you breathe in those dust storms?
Through a little surgeon's mask, which didn't stop much of it, but that's all we had.
Yeah. Now, when you went to the movies, they had the color cartoon and news of the world. Were you aware of the war in China when Japan had invaded China in the
Yes.
30s?
Yes, I was.
When you saw this on the newsreel, what'd you think?
Well, I remember what my father told me. He said, we're going to be in war with those little so-and-sos before long. And as we would drive down the highway, and we'd see trucks that had metal scrap in the bed of the truck, and my father would say, "See that? That's going to be shot back at me one of these days."
Now, what about the rise of Hitler? Of course, they showed the big rallies on the newsreel.
Oh, I worried about that, and I can still see the newsreels of those Nazi rallies that he had, and they were unsettling and worrisome to me as a young man, because I knew that we didn't have that kind of a military, and we were going to have to get a strong military to be able to stand against them.
Were there many German families in the Norman area?
Not many, but there were some. As a matter of fact, there was one particular German family there, and they were not Nazis, but they had communist ties. He was a professor at the University of Oklahoma, and I used to hear a lot about them.
Now, around the house, what chores did you do?
Oh, I helped with the yard, and I was available to help my mother in ways that she needed. And then, of course, I was doing my schoolwork also.
Describe your house.
It was a small house up in the north part of town, and it had one bathroom, and we built a new bedroom on the south end of it, which gave us a little more room, but it was a crowded house.
Was it made of wood, brick?
Wood.
Wood.
It was wooden. That little white frame house.
Is it still there?
No, it isn't. It's been torn down some years.
Okay.
It was torn down to make room for some businesses that moved in there.
Where were you December 7th, 1941?
I was at Abilene, Texas. My father was on active duty. He was with the 45th. And that Sunday I rode with him out to Camp Barkley, Texas, right outside of Abilene, Texas. It had been established in those days. And we had the car radio on, and we were stunned to find out that the Japanese had attacked Pearl Harbor. And I realized that Pearl Harbor was in Hawaii, but I didn't really know as much about it as I later learned. But I remember it very well, and I remember Dad. I was 14 years old at the time, and I remember Dad pat me on top of the head and said, "Well, little Denny will never have to go." And I've been many times since.
After the war started, did you help with the scrap metal drives or rubber drives or paper
Oh yeah,
drives?
oh yeah. Yeah, I did, and that was one way we could help the war effort, was to watch for aluminum items which could be used in the aircraft manufacture. That was the main thrust we had insofar as war material was concerned, was to build aircraft and armored vehicles, tanks.
Where would you? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Where would you take the scrap metal?
They usually had a place down near the Sooner Theater in Norman, and we'd take it down there and leave it there.
How did
We made quite a during World War II, the United States of America became the arsenal of democracy. And for instance, we built 22 large aircraft carriers, 8 battleships, 48 cruisers, 349 destroyers, 420 destroyer escorts, those are small destroyers, 203 submarines, 34 million tons of merchant ships, 100,000 fighter aircraft, 98,000 bombers, 24,000 transport aircraft, 58,000 training aircraft, 93,000 tanks, 257,000 artillery pieces, 105,000 mortars, 3 million machine guns, and 2,500 military trucks. Outside of that, we didn't have much that we did in World War II insofar as being the arsenal of the democracy, as they called us.
How did rationing affect you?
Well, gasoline is what was the main effect of rationing. And there was food rationing too. It never did seem to keep us from having a properly set table at home. My mother watched it rather closely, but outside of the fact that we didn't have much gasoline to run the car, and I was a teenager, so at the time when it started, and I would like to have had more gasoline, but I have a hunch that my folks were rather glad we didn't have any extra.
Now, some of the women save bacon grease.
Yes.
Did your mother save bacon grease?
Yes, she did.
What's bacon grease used for with the military?
With the military, I really don't know.
Someone said it was using explosives somehow, but I'm not sure how.
I imagine that it was.
Yeah. Okay.
But she kept a big jar on her stove, and she kept bacon grease.
Mm-hmm. Did you follow the progress of the war in school?
Yes, I did. I've always been very interested in military happenings in the world, and I followed it, I think, more carefully than most people did.
Now, when you heard the USS Oklahoma had been sunk at Pearl Harbor, what'd you think?
Well, I didn't know very much about the battleship Oklahoma, but since I've learned a lot. Mm-hmm. And they finally got it up, and they returned it to the States, and it foundered and sank in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and there she lies to this very day.
Where she should be.
And we lost a lot of men on the battleship Oklahoma. One of them lives up in Dewey, Oklahoma.
Pete Williams. No, Pete Williams is survivor.
Yeah.
And then there's a boy from Bartonville on the Arizona.
Yeah.
No elite.
There was.
Still on the Arizona.
The Arizona was that was a well-known ship, and it had a very violent ending. The fires got to ammunition aboard the Arizona, and it exploded, and that's the big picture of Pearl Harbor. Is
Lonnie Cook lives in Morris, Oklahoma, was on the Arizona.
Yeah.
One of 12 still living.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What'd you do after high school?
Well, I went to the service, and
Yeah, go ahead.
phlebitis is what I had.
Phlebitis.
Phlebitis.
Okay.
And
So you're going to join the Marines.
yeah, and so they canceled my enlistment, sent me home, and I had to walk on crutches for a while.
But your father did not want you to join the Marines.
No, he wanted me to go to the Army as he did when he was 17 years old. So, anyway, my father was a veteran of World War I, too.
Yes. Was he 36th Division, World War I?
Yeah, he was.
Mm-hmm.
He was. And he was in a machine gun battalion, 131st Machine Gun Battalion. That was a machine gun war, was World War I. That was the weapon that was known as the Queen of the Battlefield, was the machine gun. Both sides used it, and it was really a a wicked weapon in that day and time.
Did he talk about the war much?
Yeah, he told me a lot about it. He told me is what I mentioned the other night. He says, listen to what I say, boys, talking to me and my brother. He said, follow the flag. If you follow the flag, you'll never get off on the wrong tack. And that's the way my family's been, and it's still that way. I've had grandsons and sons in every war since Korea.
Now, tell me about going fishing. And
Okay. I went fishing to a small lake outside of Norman, and I say lake, it's more likely a pond, but I suddenly had a high fever, I realized. I was very hot, and a stupid thing I did, I got a canteen and dipped it in the water of the lake and drank it. I was just, I had to have some water, and that was a stupid thing to do. And by the time I got home, I had a high fever, and they called a doctor, and Dr. Mayfield in Norman. He diagnosed it as thrombophlebitis in my left leg. That's very, very, very dangerous sickness. I found out, I didn't even know what it was, but it's where the large vein in your leg clots, and it's very dangerous. The clots can break loose and go to your heart, go to your brain, or anything else. But my father, who was professor of military science and tactics at the University of Oklahoma, after he returned from Europe on limited duty, my father had me sent to the Naval Hospital there in Norman, and I stayed out there about 90 days, and I lost down from 165 pounds to 112, and I couldn't really walk on that leg for a long time. But I walked on crutches for a while, and the Marine Corps canceled my enlistment because of what had happened to me physically, and sent me home, and I was crestfallen because I thought I could never go be a part of the war, which I really wanted to do. That's just the way I was, and in a sense the way I am.
how long did it take you to recover?
I've never completely recovered.
Okay.
I still have problems with that leg. And I was very lucky to make it through, and I'm 87 years old now, and I would say that I'm going to last another 20 or 30 years.
So when did you join the Army?
Well, then when I turned 18, I immediately went down and applied for immediate induction in selective service. There, at that time of the war, the last year of the war, you couldn't just go down to the recruiting office and join. You had to go through selective service. And so I applied for immediate induction. They sent me to Oklahoma City, and I went through this draft line, and at that time of the war, the last year of the war, we were down pretty low insofar as physical prowess of the inductees. And I went through, and all the way through they say, you want Army, Navy, Marine Corps? And I said, Army, Army, Army. And they thought that I was crazy, I suppose. But the last man that sat on the board that passed the inductees was the lieutenant commander out of the Navy that had been my doctor. He said to me, and I quote, "What in the hell are you doing here?" And I said, "Look, let me go to the service." I said, "I'll go and I'll find a place and I'll serve. And if you don't, I'm going to be riding the sick book for the rest of my life. And I just want to serve my country, the same as you do." And he said, "Well, let me think about it." And he sat over there and he'd look at me and he'd shake his head. Finally, he came over and says, "If you're dumb enough to go, I'm stupid enough to send you." And he sent me to the U.S. Army. And that night I was at Camp Chaffee, Arkansas. And from there I went to Fort Sill and went to basic training in the artillery over at Fort Sill.
So you went to Camp Chaffee first?
Camp Chaffee, but stayed there 6 days and then went to Fort Sill.
Tell me about basic training.
Well, it was not easy, but not really hard. But it was doubly tough on me because I had that leg that I had to keep working with. But we did one 20-mile march. And that was the hardest thing that I've ever had to do in my life. Somebody was carrying my pack and somebody else was carrying, finally they were carrying my rifle, and I was stumbling along with them, and I made it all the way, all 20 miles. My leg became very swollen from that, but I did make it through basic training.
When did you join the Army? I didn't ask.
April of 1945. April 5th, 1945. That's when I was sworn in.
Okay.
And I applied to go to OCS.
What's your most vivid memory of basic training?
The complete different background of almost everyone that was in my basic training unit. They were from everywhere, and most of them were not happy to be in, and I was happy that I was in. And again, there were a lot of them thought I was crazy about when they knew my past health history. But I applied to go to Officers Candidate School, and that, as I was getting out of basic training, and I went before this board, and I remember there was a colonel on the board, and he said, "Do you have any tattoos?" And I said, "No, sir." He said, "Good. If you had a tattoo, you'd be going out that door right now." And I said, "Well, I don't have a tattoo, and I still don't have a tattoo." But nonetheless, they approved me for either infantry OCS or artillery OCS. And I knew that I wouldn't be able to handle infantry OCS with my leg in a situation that was going to be with me. So I went to artillery OCS, and I made it. And still had trouble with my leg. It swelled, and I got the medics to give me a letter saying that I didn't have to wear a legging on my left leg. And I would go out with a legging on my right leg and none on my left leg. The first MP that saw me said, "What are you doing? You're out of uniform." And I'd show them the letter. But I did. I made it through OCS. As a matter of fact, I learned to be a darn good artilleryman at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. That's where they came from.
When did you get your commission?
When did I get it?
Yes.
I got it we graduated in December of 1945.
Now, in basic training, did you request the artillery?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I knew I couldn't probably make it physically in the infantry, and I had a brother in the infantry, and he's needled me all my life about not being in the infantry, but I've got a story to tell you about him in Korea when the time comes.
Okay.
But at any rate,
what did you do on VJ Day when the war ended?
I remember we were in the last days of Officers Kansas School, and we were scheduled to go to Japan. And we were walking at noon hour, walking back to our hutments that we were in at Sill, and all of a sudden we see people breaking out of tents and hooray, 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 and the news of the dropping of the atomic bomb on Japan had just come there that day. And that was in August of 1945.
Was that the end of basic?
Well, it was while I was in OCS.
Okay, you were in OCS.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, anyway, this class was scheduled to go as forward observers for the invasion of Japan. And they switched us and sent us to Europe. And I have a good idea that that's the reason I'm still alive at 87. Because if I'd gone to Japan on the invasion of Japan, that would have been a bloodbath like nothing we ever knew. But I went over and I was in the Army of Occupation.
What ship were you on to go to Europe?
I went on the SS Lejeune, Lejeunne. I can tell you a little bit about it if you want to hear it.
Sure.
That was a former German liner, and it was the Windhoek, Windhok. And it was with the Graf Spee, which was sunk down in Montevideo Harbor by the British. And so the Windhoek was one of their supply ships, and they kept crew replacements on there and such, and this is what I have found out about that ship. So when the Graf Spee got sunk, they poured the boilers full of cement and scuttled the Windhoek. And when we got in the war, our Navy went down there, and here was a very presentable liner that had been scuttled in Montevideo Harbor, and they raised it, but they couldn't do anything about the cement in the
In the boilers?
boilers.
Yeah.
And so 18 knots was the fastest that it'd go after they brought it up. It had been a very fast ship, but they raised it and they put it, they took a lot of troops to Europe on the SS Lejeune, and including me and mine, and I know it's been scrapped since that time, but 18 knots was the fastest that we could go.
How'd you pass the time on the trip?
Oh, I read a lot, and they had us junior officers on that ship. They had us standing a watch to. We had 4,000 on the ship, and they were a rather rebellious group.
Did you think there may be a rogue German submarine out there that didn't care that war was over?
Not really.
What were you told to do in case the ship was sinking?
They told us each of us were given a place to go to if something happened to the ship.
Were there enough lifeboats?
Yeah, they had some lifeboats.
Enough for everybody?
No. But I know that we had a rough crossing because the weather. It was the old North Atlantic was really in great waves and so forth. But they said that that ship could stand at 18 degrees, and in the little room where I was with 50 other second lieutenants, there was a thing on the wall, and we could see how much the ship was listing, and we knew about that 18 degrees, and sure enough, it hit 18 degrees, and we just held our breath, but the wind kind of died down, and we went ahead and we landed at Le Havre.
Many guys get seasick?
Oh, it was 4,000 troops. Man, did they ever. I mean, they were hanging over the side the whole time.
So you land at Le Havre, and what do you do?
We were there for, I'd say 4 days.
Had Le Havre been cleaned up, the harbor?
Mostly,
Yeah.
but it was useful. But it never was as bad as some of the other ports there on, let me see, what was the one that was really
Cherbourg?
Cherbourg. Cherbourg was absolutely useless. And the German troops were there defending Cherbourg till the last day of the war in Europe. But I don't know that is anything that would be of interest to you, but I went from Le Havre. We went by rail to Germany, and we went to Bamberg in Germany, and they were organizing a unit that was really an interesting unit. They call it the U.S. Zone Constabulary, and they transferred mostly cavalry units into that, and they changed them into constabulary, and I ended up in the U.S. Constabulary.
What were your duties?
What?
What were your duties?
Patrolling, and there were certain SS people that had just walked out of the German army into civilian life, so to speak. But anybody that's an Oberscharführer and above, that high sergeant, was automatic arrest, and they had to go to the penitentiary. And so we spent most of our time finding those SS people, and we had some very interesting times.
How would you find the SS people?
They had an SS tattoo under their arm, and they had a number, and that's the way we would do. We would tell them to take their shirt off, and if they were SS, well, that SS was under there, and they were automatic arrest. And then we wouldn't hold them for good unless they were an Oberscharführer or above.
Yeah.
But
How long were you in the Army of Occupation?
a year.
What's your most vivid memory of that year?
Well, I'll tell you what. We went to find an SS man that was in a building that had been a German military building during the war. And the guy's name was, strange I'd remember this, but I remember it. His name was Fritz Endress, Endress. And he was automatically under arrest when we could find him. But he was hiding in this building. And we searched and searched and searched, and we could never find him. But I had a sergeant in my unit that spoke very good German. He was German. His name was Milky. And he would be my interpreter when I dealt with the Germans, because he could speak German so much better than I could. And we were getting ready to get back in our vehicles and leave after not having found Fritz Enders. And I turned to Milky and I says, one more time, yell for him, just see what happens. And he said, Fritz Enders. And something I'll never forget, window open, and this German SSer stuck his head out and said, "Y'all." And Milky said he was carrying a Tommy gun. And he said, "Stay where you are," in German. And we got him and arrested him. And I don't know. He went on into the prison. That I'll never forget.
What was your reaction of the German people to you?
You know, they were mostly. They were so happy that they weren't in the Russian zone. And the Russians were really tough on the Germans. And I'm sure the Germans were every bit as tough on the Russians, but millions of people left East Germany and came to West Germany because they wanted to be in the Americans' occupation. And most of them treated us very well. Some of them were die-hard Nazis, and there wasn't any way you could reach them. But those we were able to spot. There were ways we could spot them. And I would say that our occupation of Germany was a success.
You had much trouble in the denazification of Germany. Is that a proper word?
Yeah, they had a lot of intelligence that they had gotten together on Nazis and leaders and war criminals and so forth and so on. And we got rid of most of the real hardcore Nazis. They weren't necessarily all bad either.
So tell me about coming home.
Well, I wanted to come home, and I wanted to get home in time to go back to college. And my battalion commander was a good guy, and he said, "I'm going to fly you home." And so he sent me to, I rode the train from Frankfurt to Paris, and it was a very famous train in Europe, and it was non-stop, and they took us to Paris, and I went to Orly Field in Paris, and that was where Lindbergh landed. Orly Field, O-R-L-Y. And we were there without any duty for 23 days. And at that time, I was 20 years old. And I told my dad when I got home, I said, I was 20 when I got there, and I was 26 when I left there. 23 days later. But anyway, we had quite a time, and we got on a C-54, and we flew to Iceland. And we thought, well, it's bound to be cold, so we just put on all the uniform we could put on to get off. We spent the night in Iceland, and it wasn't bad at all. It's just barely freezing. And so I remember the largest human being I ever saw was an Icelandic policeman that was there, and he was a huge person. But we spent the night there, and the next day we took off, and we flew to Presque Isle, Maine, Presque. And the sun was shining, but there was deep snow. But we thought, well, we're not going to have all those clothes on here because the sun's shining, and we're not going to make the mistake we made at Iceland. And we went out, it was 10 below zero. But I never will forget, that's the coldest place. So I flew from Presque Isle, Maine, to Washington, D.C. And at Washington, my uncle, who was a colonel in the field artillery, he ended up as a major general. But he was stationed in Washington, and he fixed it up so I could visit them for 3 days, and I visited with him for 3 days, and then I flew on home. But while we were there, there was a P-38. You know what a P-38 was? That was flown by the Ecuadorian Air Force. And this guy was flying over Washington, D.C. And he flew into an American passenger plane, and it killed the pilot of the P-38 and everybody on the American passenger plane. I just happen to remember that. That really shook us up, because especially when we got in another airplane and flew back to Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. But I got back, and by this time it was in January of '46, and the next day I enrolled in the University of Oklahoma. I did my pre-law there, and I roomed together, and we were in the same fraternity. And
what'd you study?
What?
What'd you study at OU?
Pre-law.
Pre-law. Okay.
Yeah, and so for 2 years I was in my pre-law, and they had a deal where they would give you 1 year's service. They would count that as school service if you had commission time and so forth. And so I got into law school a year early because of my record in the service. Mm-hmm. So I went for 2 years in law school, and I was working with a guy that he was painting an old building, and it was an old school building he was painting, and it was really a tough deal. We were on a scaffold, and I had my radio listening to it, and it was in June of 1950, and all of a sudden it came over the radio, and I had a little radio I was listening to. It said that North Korea had invaded South Korea. And I looked at Mr. Stubbs, I was working with him, and I said, "Stubby, I'm leaving." He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to Korea." And he said, "Are you serious?" And I said, "The war just started." And I said, "I know that amongst the National Guard divisions in Oklahoma, I was in the 45th Division at that time."
What unit were you in?
What?
What unit were you in?
I was in the Division Artillery, the headquarters there at the headquarters was at Norman, and General Muldrow was the commanding general.
What fraternity did you join at OU?
Beta Theta Pi.
Beta Theta Pi.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my brother was in the 45th also, but he was in the 179th Infantry. And he was decorated in World War II with a Bronze Star. And he had a lot of combat.
What's his name?
Joseph D. Jr. And he's dead now.
Yeah.
So, anyway, he was a captain. And the instant we were called active duty, I had just gotten out of artillery OCS not much before, and I hope well trained as an artilleryman, and I was sent down to the 171st Field Artillery Battalion to B Battery of the 171st as a battery exec. And amongst the men in B Battery 171st was Walter Allison of Bartonville, the guy that used to be president of the bank here. And Walter and I are still very close. But he was really an excellent soldier. And I made him a corporal, and I made him a sergeant while we were in B Battery. Then we went to Camp Polk, Louisiana, and had some hard training down there. That was hard training. And we'd been there a short time, and they told us they were sending us to Hokkaido, which is the North Island of Japan. And it is a very primitive place, and Hokkaido is originally occupied by Ainus, A-I-N-U. And they were the original native Orientals that at one time occupied all of Japan, but they ended up on Hokkaido where they'd been driven. And they were very interesting people. Some of them blue-eyed.
They're Caucasian, they're not.
Well, they're semi-Caucasian, they called it.
They're called the hairy Ainu because
Yeah,
they have a lot of
that's
facial
right.
hair.
They had facial hair, and the Japanese didn't have.
Yes.
Nothing like the Ainus had. But they were very interesting people. See up there on top, there's a bear up there, a carved bear. They worship bears.
Okay. Yes.
And there's one of them up there.
Yeah.
Let me see. It's kind of interesting. I want you to see it. They used to have a deal where one Ainu would get into a cage with a bear. And Hokkaido had plenty of them. And he would fight the bear with a stick he had. And it got down to the point where when we were there, 5 of them would get sticks and get in with one bear, and they'd kill the old bear. It's kind of hard on bears, but anyway. I want to show you that before you leave. But
were you at Camp Drake on Hokkaido?
What?
Were you at Camp Drake on Hokkaido?
No, we were at Chitose.
Chitose.
That's where the pilots of that were on the carriers, the Navy pilots were trained at Chitose, Japan.
How do you spell that?
Chitose.
How
And
long?
we were at Chitose.
How long were you there?
Let's see. About, I'd say 5 months. And it was really a touchy place up on Hokkaido because the Russians had 5 airborne divisions stationed 5 minutes flying time from Siberia to, and they really contemplated invading Japan because they wanted to be part of the occupation of Japan because they wanted to turn them into communists. And so we had to spend a lot of time out with our guns laid on that airstrip because that would be where they would drop those people at Chitose airstrip. And we had a lot of intelligence that they were going to drop those airborne divisions on Hokkaido. And we were the only American combat troops there as our division. So we had to be ready to go. But we, in December then, the first part of December, we went to a port of embarkation.
December of
1951.
51, okay.
We went to Muroran, Muroran. And we landed, we were placed on a troop ship, and we went on the SS Pickaway. It's a real well-known ship from World War II, Pickaway. And they took us to Korea on the 7th day of December, which is easy to remember because it's the same day that the Japs hit Pearl Harbor. And we landed at about 11 o'clock at night at Pusan. No, I said Pusan just a minute. Just a second. Incheon. And there was an old rickety train waiting there alongside where we docked, and they marched us off of this Pickaway. And an interesting thing happened on that night. There was a lieutenant, an infantry lieutenant, and he kind of stayed by himself the 3 days it took us to get up there. And he didn't have much to do with anybody. But when we were unloading and they were putting us on the way, we hear bam. He shot himself with a .45. He didn't have to go to combat, but if I were going to do that, I would wait until I had the enemy, and I'd let the enemy do that. But anyway, I think he had some trouble at home, one thing and another. But that really shook everybody up that knew that happened. But they loaded us on this old train. There weren't any windows on it, no doors, and it was 10 degrees. And we got on that thing, and I'll swear to gosh, I had a fifth of scotch with me in my musette bag, and that thing kept me going. I don't know how. It was the coldest ride, and we just rode and rode and rode, and it was underpowered, and it was just not moving very fast. But we could see the artillery landing out on the front for a long way, and we were going to relieve the 1st Cavalry Division, and they were going to take our equipment, but we left our trucks and so forth back where on Hokkaido, and they were going to come in and take all of our equipment, and we were going to take their equipment. Well, the equipment was really run down, and I don't blame them. They had been fighting with it for 2 years, or a year, maybe over a year. And for instance, if we took a gun up to shoot we used to shoot propaganda leaflets over to the enemy.
What guns did you have?
What?
What guns did you have?
105.
105.
And we would go move the gun up just as right on the front so we could reach a long way back. And we'd shoot those propaganda leaflets to the Chinese over there. And we'd have to use 2 trucks, the brakes on one and the motor on the other to get up there. We really had to. But finally, by the time we left, we had a viable motor vehicles and our howitzers. We got new tubes in all of them.
Where were you in Korea at this time? Where was this happening?
Well, it was at our sector had Pork Chop Hill, it had Old Baldy, had T-Bone Mountain. They were all in our sector. That's one of the hot spots on the front over there. And so that's where they put us. And we were, that night, we relieved B Battery of the 99th Field. It was the 1st Cav, and I really got along good with their captain. I happen to remember his name. It was Jimmy Lynch. Jimmy Lynch Auto Show. I don't know if you knew. That's who he was. And I had known about him, but anyway, he said, who's going to fire the first shell for the 45th? And we were the first ones to get in the battery. And I said, well, I guess we will, but my colonel is off the record. So I said, well, you know, I'd like to do that. He said, well, come on down to guns. We got to fire some night rounds out there.
Now this is your colonel?
No, it was the captain in the 99th.
Okay.
He said, we'll go down there, and said, he just will think he's going to fire the first rounds. So we got, and I said, hello from Oklahoma. I wrote it on the side of this round. And so it was about 3 in the morning, and they loaded up. And it was going to land on T-Bone Mountain out there. It was a huge mountain. And so I pulled a lanyard on it, and I fired the first round, fired by the 45th Division.
What did your colonel say?
Oh, he never knew about it. he came over in the morning and fired it, and he thought he'd really done something. We all congratulated him. But they left then in about 2 days.
For the first calves?
Yeah, they went on back to Hokkaido. Yeah. And they went right to the same place where we had been, had left from. And we were then over there for about 10 months in the line. And my battery, we got into a firefight that I probably ought to tell you about. As there was a hill that's well known over there, and it's called Old Baldy. And Old Baldy is Hill 255. And the Chinks liked Old Baldy, and we liked Old Baldy. So through the months that the first calf had been there, they would be there in the daylight hours, and they'd pull back. And the Chinese would come in and spend the night there, and they'd leave at dawn, and the first calf would go back out there, and it was kind of an agreement, I guess, between them and the Chinks. But we got a new division commander, and he said, we're going to stay on Old Baldy. So they got a bunch of entrenching weapons and one thing and another, and they drug them all out there, and they went on Old Baldy and in the daytime, and they got ready. They knew they were going to have to defend it at night. And when the Chinks came that night, then we shot the daylights out of them, and they just went wild, those Chinese, with that. And they had a company the first night was a platoon, and then they had a company that came in the next night, and finally they hit it with an infantry regiment. And they never, as far as I know, we still hold Old Baldy. And in that firefight, my battery, which I had left, I went to the Battalion Fire Direction Center. In my battery, in the last week that I was there, fired 8,000 rounds of VT.
Of
variable time.
Okay.
That's radio control. It explodes at 20 yards. If clouds or one thing or another on the way didn't cause it to go off somewhere down the gun target line. But anyway, I was in the Fire Direction Center.
And what's a Fire Direction Center?
That's where the battalion has a Fire Direction Center that amasses fire from all the batteries. Okay. And they can make it all hit at once, or however they want to do it.
What was your duty there, the Fire Direction Center?
I was assistant S3.
Okay. That's training?
Assistant plans and training.
Plans and training, yes.
And
yes.
the way it worked out is all night long I had to run the Fire Direction Center, and that's when all the fighting was. And about 2 days before I was to leave to come home, they overran our troops out on Old Baldy, but our people were in a big dug-in thing that they had made there, and they were still alive and kicking in that huge bunker. And so we ended up firing VT, variable time, right on top of them. And it just cut the Chinese to pieces. But we had to, and they couldn't talk because the Chinese were on the bunker, on top of the bunker, right over them. And finally the radio came back on, and the observers were talking about that there were dead Chinamen all over that hill, that our artillery had, we caught them in the open.
And what'd you feel firing on your own troops?
Oh, it's hardest thing I've ever done, but we knew if they were exploding 20 yards over them, that there weren't any of them that would hit and penetrate, that it would just be fragments.
Yeah. And how far behind the front line is the artillery pieces, the guns?
About 1,500 yards.
Okay. And how far will a 105 fire?
7.5 miles.
Okay.
And of course, if you high angle, and we shot a lot of high angle fire because we had to get up over those hills, and then. But anyway.
Now, who identifies the target?
What?
Who identifies the target?
Observer.
Observer. Board observer.
Lieutenant. That's what I would have been if my OCS class had got to Japan in time.
Now, what about short rounds?
They fired every once in a while.
Ever take out a forward observer with a short round?
No. Not that I know of.
Okay.
But we lost one from here. A boy from here was killed a year after I got home. His name was Victor Rood, R-O-O-D.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And they never found his body.
Did you know him?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about him.
He was a good boy. He was a fraternity brother of mine. And he'd married and had a son. Now I know his widow. She's remarried now, and the son is Barbara. All the way home, I was just holding my breath because that fight was just boiling over there between the Chinese and us on Old Baldy, and I knew if they really ran into a buzzsaw that they would stop all of us from going home and send us back, and we just kind of held our breath. But
and Victor Root is a boy that was killed.
oh yeah, but he was killed way up in 1953, and he was one of the last Oklahoman that was killed in the Korean War.
Yeah.
But they overran his observation post, and we never were able to find his body or anything.
What's your most vivid memory of Korea?
That fight that night when we had to shoot on top of our own troops.
What was the reaction of the local people to you in Korea?
Well, of course, we weren't amongst the Koreans as such. We were with Korean soldiers.
Show him your little Oriental man over there.
So you said you weren't with the local Koreans then, where you were?
Oh, no. We were with Korean Service Corps people. They were part of the Korean Army that they would assign to us to use them to help dig emplacements and so forth.
Ever work with any UN troops?
What? Yeah. One group over there that really made a name for themselves were the Turks. They were really good soldiers. And there was a friend of mine that ran a shoe repair depot 60 miles behind the front. He was a quartermaster officer. And they were operating their shoe repair depot. And here comes a Turk soldier. And he was hungry, so they fed him. And they called back to their headquarters and told them they had a Turk soldier, and they get word right back, said he's a deserter, said hold him right there. So they told him that they'd have to take his rifle and that they were coming after him. So here comes a 3/4 ton truck sometime later with 6 Turk soldiers in there with rifles. And this I didn't see, but this lieutenant told me all about it. He was from Norman. And they took this guy and thanked him very much for letting them know about it. And they just marched him off the road to a field. And the 6 soldiers got out, made a firing squad, and shot him right there. They were tough hombres.
Yeah.
Tough hombres. But that I can't even swear to. The guy might have been just telling me something he heard somewhere else, but he told me that he saw them just drive their 3/4 ton up, get out, make a firing squad, and just killed him right there.
What was the weather in Korea?
Cold. Coldest darn place I ever saw. And in the winter, you would freeze to the commode, you know, where you made little, take ammunition boxes and make a little latrine and get a little dynamite and blow a hole in the ground and set it over there. But you'd sit down and freeze and just get up and all the skin would go off your rear end. Oh, I hated that worse than anything I had to do is to use one of those so-called privies in
Have many
real
cases,
cold weather.
Had many cases of frostbite?
The infantry did,
Yeah.
but we were able to, I don't recall, but maybe 2 or 3 people had frostbite amongst my troops.
No. Tell me again your unit in Korea.
B Battery, 171st Field Artillery Battalion. And I got promoted to captain about midway in my service in Korea. And so I became a pretty young captain. And Walter Allison is, I stay in close contact with him.
Where does he live?
Here. He's retired now. And his first wife died and he's remarried. And he's got a family by his first wife. But
You have an officers club over there in Korea?
no,
No. Any USO shows come through?
well, one time I heard that I'll think of her name in a minute. She's a movie actress, but she was supposed to be back at the airstrip, and I went back there, and we had big trays that I was eating right back there with them, and I had a steak on this big tray, and I was in this mess tent, and this gal comes in. She's got on fatigues, army fatigues, and
Was she the comedian?
no, she was just an actress.
Okay.
And so I was sitting at a table with my tray in front of me, and she walks in and walked down the aisle. Dang, she didn't sit down right next to me. And it just really spooked me. And I turned that tray over, and that big steak right in my lap. Who was that gal?
Was it someone like Lana Turner or?
No, she was not near as well known as,
Okay.
but she's the first white woman I'd seen in a long, long time.
Tell me about the trip home.
Well, I ought to probably tell you about the trip over from through the Panama Canal to Hokkaido.
Okay.
We went on General Weigel, W-E-I-G-L-E, and it was a Navy troop ship.
And this is
And-
going to Korea.
Yeah, this was going to Hokkaido
Yeah,
before we
okay.
went to Korea. And then we went from Hokkaido to Korea on the Pickaway. I told you about that. But the Weigel was, it was just a fit for the Panama Canal. We went through the Panama Canal, and it's that big. It was a big ship. And there was another there were two of our troop ships went. One was the Weigel, and there was another that was really a lot more commodious than the Weigel. And division headquarters went on that. And they were out sunbathing and everything, and we just crammed into the Weigel. But we went through the Panama Canal, and there were a bunch of English merchant sailors in a smaller ship as we were coming along. And they were a pretty scurvy-looking bunch. And one guy was holding a hammer and a sickle on a. He said, "Way low Joe Stalin gets a hold of you blokes." And people were throwing boots at him and everything. But that was an interesting thing, going through the Panama Canal.
Mm-hmm.
But then we went right down the equator. Boy, it was one hot trip. And by the time we got to Hokkaido, of course, he was colder than the dickens. But I had 154 men in my assigned to my battery at full strength, and we got integrated while we were over there. We didn't have any blacks at all until we got over into Korea, and they called me from and said, "We're sending you a replacement," and he's black. His name was Eddie Bell, and he was a good little guy from Texas. And he came in, and I've always been glad that he was the first one we got, because the first sergeant, I had an Indian first sergeant, and he called those firing battery crews up in the center of the battery, and he said, "We're going to get a black replacement." And he said, "I want to tell you that he is an American soldier, and he's entitled to be treated like an American soldier. And if you don't treat him that way, you're going to answer to me." And he was a tough old guy, that first sergeant. He'd been the first sergeant of that same battery all the way through World War II. And he's dead now, but he's probably one of the three best friends I ever had in my life.
What was his name?
John T. Dunn, D-U-N-N. He's dead. He died after we got home. But I mean, they treated that boy nice, and he really appreciated the treatment he got in our battery. And by the time we left, there were 17 of them. And it, to have somebody that's capable of being as good a cannoneer as anybody else, and we couldn't use him because of the color of his skin. That was silly.
Yeah.
It was silly. And
What is the crew of a 105?
7.
What does each man do?
Oh, the gunner. He operates up and down. It's on the right side front. Over on the left, he's a horizontal control guy, and he operates this way. And then the chief of section, he pulls the lanyard. And when they get everything all set up and everything, but they usually don't have 7. They can run it well with 4 or 5, but they have 7 because you never know when you're going to need another one.
Now, what does the 105 shell weigh?
Well, it has a killing area of 50 feet. When it lands with fuse quick, which means when it goes off when it lands, it has a killing area of 50 square feet.
Well, what does that shell weigh? How many pounds?
I'm trying to say 50 pounds.
Okay. How are you resupplied in a combat situation?
Oh, ammunition trucks, and you go back to the ammunition depot, and they load your truck, and you bring it up and take it to each weapon and unload it.
Now tell me about the trip home.
The what?
The trip home.
Oh, we came home on the USS Pope, P-O-P-E. And we were all just worn to frazzle after we'd been through that fight on Old Baldy and all. And those doughboys that came home, Paul Reed, he was a real good buddy of mine. He ended up as a general. But he was so tired that he got in his bunk. They had double bed bunks. And he didn't get out of that bed for 5 days. And he didn't move to the point that his self-winding watch wouldn't wind itself. And I told him, I said, "You sorry son of a bitch, you're the only person I ever heard of that had a self-winding watch that ran down because you were so quiet." But those doe feet, they were really worn out. I mean, crawling up and down those hills, somebody shooting at you, that's a tough go. That's a tough go.
Where'd the ship land?
We landed at San Francisco.
What'd you think going under the Golden Gate Bridge coming home?
There was a beautiful redhead on the pier, and she was singing "My Hero," the song "My Hero," and everybody on that ship just felt like she was singing directly to them. I tell you what, that was a great feeling. Great feeling.
How long are you in the service in the Army?
5 years.
5 years. Mm-hmm. What'd you do after you got out?
I mean, after I stayed in the reserve until I had my full 20 years.
20 years, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But I never did draw a retirement. I just stayed in the inactive reserve for the last 5 years.
Yeah, okay. Were you ever called to active duty again?
No,
Okay.
no, thank goodness.
And when'd you come to Bartonville?
I came to Bartlesville after I got out of law school. I finished my last year of law school after I got back from Korea, and that was a tough go. I mean, I hadn't been reading any law books for a long time, and it was tough. I had to really work.
Now, why'd you come here?
Barbara's from here, and so
What's your wife's name?
Barbara
What was her maiden name?
Hopper, Hopper.
Where'd you meet?
What?
Where did you meet?
At OU when I came back my last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you came up here because of her.
Yeah. I hadn't had her talked into marrying me quite when I graduated. So I came up here and I went to work for city service. Mm-hmm. Worked for them as a lawyer. And I could just feel my law leaving me. And so after 7 months, I quit and hung out a shingle.
When did you get married?
In 1954.
1954.
First baby was my son. He was born 11 months the day after we got married.
Mm-hmm. Would you join the Army again?
Would I? Yeah. I say that, I'm sure of it. I wouldn't have had all my grandsons and what have you in the Army if I hadn't felt like that it was the right thing to do.
I'd like to do a word association.
Okay.
I'll give you some words, you give me your
Okay.
reaction. The first one is Adolf Hitler.
A mental case. But he was not without a blind following amongst the German people.
And I've had several Germans tell me that we created him because of the Treaty of Versailles.
Well, they'll
He turned
do
our
that.
back on Germany and walked off.
Oh yeah,
Basic training.
basic training. Physically challenging and mentally let me get the word that I want. I want to think a minute here because I want to use the right word. Mentally unchallenging.
Officer Candidate School.
Officer Candidate School was very challenging technically, artillery. But I learned every day that I was in Officer Candidate School, I learned something that stayed with me the rest of my life.
Occupation duty.
An interesting time for bachelor soldiers.
Troopship.
Overcrowded, poor food.
Hokkaido.
A primitive place with much natural beauty.
Korea.
Cold. The Korean people tend to be hard taskmasters. I'll tell you what, we were always told that if you get to a position where you have to give up, try to give up to a Chinese unit rather than a North Korean unit, because the North Koreans will just chop you to pieces. That guy that's running North Korea right now, you talk about a bloodthirsty man.
Artillery.
A very, very valuable weapon on the battlefield.
45th Division.
It's made up of Oklahomans, and Oklahomans are my favorite people.
Harry Truman.
He was an old artillery battery commander in World War I. And he said something that I always remembered. He says, even a damn fool can make a good artillery battery commander if he's got a good first sergeant.
Dwight Eisenhower.
I met him and talked to him, and I felt that he was a good man.
How do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered as a patriotic American.
Now it's opened up. You can say anything you want.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to talk about?
I'm proud of all of my sons and my one son and all of my grandsons that have served. I have 9 grandsons, and so far 8 of them have service, and that's a pretty good record. The other one is a senior in high school, and it looks like he's going to be a college prospect as a quarterback. And before it's all over, I imagine he'll do his time.
Well, sir, this is an excellent interview.
Well, I hope so.
I want to thank you for your service and thank you for the interview.
Well, thank you, Joe. That was kind of around the bush, but
That's fine. And again, this is May 21st, 2014. My name is Joe Todd. This has been an interview at Denzil Garrison in Bartonville, Oklahoma. Thank you.
thank you.